The unseen icon, a moment of mistaken identity at the Grand Oak. It was an ordinary Friday evening in Los Angeles. The dimmed lights of the Grand Oak restaurant cast a golden glow over the polished marble floors, where LA's elite gathered in their designer suits and sparkling jewelry. The hum of chatter filled the air, as socialites, tech moguls, and influencers mingled, their faces glued to their smartphones. Yet, amongst them sat a man who, despite his presence, went unnoticed by most. Wearing a simple navy polo and faded khaki pants, James Hunter, a well-known but low-key Hollywood icon, was hardly what you'd expect in a luxury dining establishment like the Grand Oak. The casual attire, though inconspicuous, held a quiet sense of authority, a stark contrast to the extravagant guests around him. What no one knew, except for a select few, was that James wasn't just another patron, he owned the very restaurant they dined in. For the past 6 months, James had quietly taken ownership of the Grand Oak, not out of a desire for fame or prestige, but to preserve a legacy of authenticity. The real test of a restaurant, he believed, wasn't how it treated the famous or the wealthy, but how it treated ordinary people. And tonight, the restaurant's newest waitress, Emily, was about to learn a valuable lesson in humility, one she'd never forget. Emily, fresh out of culinary school and eager to build her own reputation, was excited to work at a high-end place like the Grand Oak. But tonight, she was struggling with the divide between those who fit and those who didn't. As she maneuvered through the sea of tables, she couldn't help but cast a critical glance at the man in the navy polo, sipping his drink quietly at a corner table. To Emily, he didn't belong here, he didn't fit the image of what a Grand Oak customer should look like. His attire, simple and unremarkable, seemed to mock the luxury around him. She couldn't resist approaching his table. After all, the bar was getting crowded, and she needed to clear it for a group of VIPs expected soon. "Sir, I couldn't help but notice you've been enjoying that drink for a while now," Emily said with an insincere smile, the words dripping with false concern. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the bar? We're expecting several reservations, and this table is reserved for our more exclusive guests." James looked up at her, his expression calm and steady, the same composed gaze that had faced down countless challenges in his decades-long career. "I'm comfortable here," he replied simply, taking another sip of his drink. Emily's smile faltered slightly, but she pressed on. "You see, our customers usually appreciate the ambience of this space, something that's more fitting for people who understand luxury." She paused, letting the implication of her words hang in the air. "Perhaps you'd feel more at home elsewhere." James didn't flinch. Instead, he set his glass down slowly, as if he had all the time in the world. A few nearby patrons, who had witnessed the growing tension, exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear that Emily's judgment was crossing a line, but no one knew exactly what the consequences would be. "You're mistaken," James said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that commanded attention. "I've been coming here for the past 6 months, sitting at the same table, enjoying the same drink. But what you don't know is that I'm not just a guest. I own this restaurant." The room went silent. Emily's eyes widened in realization as the full weight of her mistake settled in. She had just tried to humiliate James Hunter, one of Hollywood's most respected figures, and, worse, she had done so at his own establishment. As Emily stood there frozen, trying to collect herself, James continued, his tone unwavering. "I didn't buy this place for status or fame. I bought it because I wanted to restore something real, a place where respect and dignity mattered more than the clothes on your back or the number of Instagram followers you have." Before she could respond, James made a simple phone call to his assistant, quietly requesting the ownership papers. In moments, a folder was brought to him, and the reality of the situation became painfully clear. Emily wasn't just facing the consequences of her arrogance, she was standing before the man who could change her career in a single moment. The staff, including a young busboy named Carlos who had witnessed the entire exchange, now stood at attention. Carlos, a recent immigrant who had worked hard to support his family, had seen the truth. Respect was about how you treated others, no matter their background or appearance. With a deep sigh, James spoke again. I'm going to give you a choice, Emily. You can leave right now, find a place that fits your idea of luxury, or you can stay and learn what real hospitality means. Carlos here, he gestured to the young busboy, he gets it. He knows what it means to treat people with dignity, and I think he could teach you a thing or two. Emily, shaken but humbled, wiped away a tear. She nodded slowly, realizing the gravity of the lesson. I'd like to stay and learn, she whispered. And so, the night continued. The tension in the air dissolved as the room, once filled with whispers and judgments, now carried an air of reflection. James Hunter had not just taught Emily a lesson, he had reminded everyone in that room that true luxury, true class, is never about appearances, but about how we treat one another. From that day on, Emily approached every table with newfound respect, understanding that luxury is not in the things we wear or the status we hold, but in the kindness we show to those around us. And as for James, you could still find him there every Friday evening, at his usual table in his simple polo, quietly ensuring that the Grand Oak upheld the values that truly mattered. The waitress' judgmental behavior, a lesson in humility. It was a typical evening at the Grand Oak, a place where the who's who of LA gathered to indulge in decadent dishes and showcase their latest designer looks. The buzz of conversations blended with the clinking of glasses, creating a buzz of anticipation for the night ahead. Yet, amid the shimmering world of wealth and luxury, a quiet figure sat in the corner of the restaurant, unnoticed by most of the glamorous guests around him. Dressed in a simple navy polo and jeans, Ben Andrews, a man of understated presence, leaned back in his chair, observing the busy scene. Few could have known that Ben wasn't just another diner, he was the owner of the Grand Oak. But unlike many of the high-profile guests who dined there, Ben had no interest in being treated like royalty. He preferred the simplicity of quiet moments, enjoying a glass of whiskey, undisturbed by the glamour of the world around him. Ben had purchased the Grand Oak 6 months ago, with one mission in mind, to restore the heart of the restaurant and bring back a focus on humility and respect, something he believed was sorely lacking in a world obsessed with appearances. Yet tonight, one of his newest staff members, a young waitress named Sophia, was about to challenge those very ideals, unknowingly setting the stage for a lesson that would change everything. Sophia, fresh out of a top-tier hospitality program, was eager to make a name for herself at a restaurant like the Grand Oak. She had learned all the fine dining etiquette, memorized the expensive menu, and was ready to serve the elite. But there was one thing Sophia didn't quite grasp: respect for people, not just their status. As she surveyed the room, her eyes fell upon Ben, sitting quietly at his corner table, his polo and jeans an apparent mismatch to the polished elegance of the venue. A sense of superiority crept into Sophia's thoughts as she looked at him. He didn't belong here, at least not in her mind. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't carrying the kind of presence she had come to associate with the wealthy. He was, in her eyes, an ordinary customer, just another older man sitting alone. As the night went on, Sophia grew impatient with the sight of Ben lingering over his drink. The restaurant was busy, and she needed the table for reserved guests. Without thinking, she approached his table with a forced smile, her tone condescending. "Sir," she began, "I couldn't help but notice you've been sitting here for quite some time. We're expecting some important guests, and this table really isn't ideal for someone like you." Ben didn't flinch. He merely looked up from his drink, meeting her gaze with quiet calm, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of experiences that no one in the room could comprehend. "I'm comfortable here," he replied simply, taking another sip from his glass. Sophia, sensing an opportunity to assert control, pressed on. "We have a very exclusive atmosphere, sir," she said, "and our guests expect a certain level of service. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the bar?" Ben, as calm as ever, shook his head gently. "No, thank you. "I'm fine here," he said, his voice steady. Sophia's patience began to wear thin. She couldn't understand why someone would insist on staying in a place they clearly didn't belong. She glanced at the young tech moguls at the next table, all dressed in the latest fashions, their eyes glued to their phones. They, at least, understood what it meant to be part of the scene. Why should this man, in his simple attire, be allowed to take up space meant for the important people? But just as Sophia was about to speak again, a quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Miguel, the young busboy, who had been working at the restaurant for 2 years. He had overheard the conversation and recognized the man sitting at the table. His face paled as he tried to get Sophia's attention. "Miss Sophia," he said quietly, "maybe you should check with Thomas first. This man, he's not just any customer." Sophia ignored him, waving him off with a dismissive gesture. "I know what I'm doing, Miguel. Go back to your work." She turned back to Ben, her attitude growing more condescending by the moment. Ben's expression remained unchanged. "You don't know who I am, do you?" he asked softly. Sophia's eyes narrowed, but she remained silent. "I own this restaurant," Ben continued, his words barely above a whisper but carrying a weight that shifted the entire atmosphere in the room. "I'm not just some random customer. And I don't need to be treated like one." The realization hit Sophia like a ton of bricks. Her face turned crimson as she suddenly understood the gravity of the mistake she had made. Not only had she disrespected a customer, she had disrespected the very person who owned the place. She stammered for a moment, searching for the right words, but Ben's calm voice cut through her panic. "I didn't buy this restaurant for the luxury or the prestige," he said, his eyes now locking with hers. "I bought it to preserve something that's been lost in today's world: respect. True class isn't about what you wear or how many followers you have. It's about how you treat people, how you treat everyone, no matter who they are." Sophia, her eyes filled with guilt, realized how far her judgment had gone astray. She had been so focused on appearances and status that she had forgotten the very essence of what made this restaurant special. It wasn't about the designer suits or the gold leaf desserts, it was about kindness, dignity, and respect for all people. Ben smiled softly, standing up from his chair. "I'm not here to make a spectacle, Sophia. But I hope this serves as a reminder. People like me don't need luxury to feel important. We just need respect. And that's something we all deserve." With those words, Ben turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Sophia standing there in stunned silence. The room remained still, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of the lesson that had just been imparted. From that day on, Sophia changed her approach to serving, learning that the true measure of luxury isn't found in the clothes we wear or the status we hold, it's found in how we treat one another, with kindness, respect, and humility. The tension builds, a moment of reckoning at the Grand Oak. The evening at the Grand Oak was a spectacle of elegance, sleek suits, shimmering jewelry, and the hum of high-profile conversations. It was a place where LA's most influential gathered to enjoy the finer things in life, from their exclusive reservations to the perfect ambience. Yet, as the night unfolded, a moment of discomfort began to ripple through the elegant dining room, unnoticed by many but keenly felt by those who knew what was truly happening. At a corner table, a man in a simple gray polo shirt sat sipping whiskey, his demeanor calm, almost too calm for a restaurant like this. His name was Jack Sullivan, and he wasn't just another customer, he was the owner of the Grand Oak, though no one in the bustling room seemed to recognize him. The veteran staff, however, knew better. They had seen him many times before, but they also knew that Jack didn't want to stand out. He believed that true luxury and respect weren't in the designer clothes you wore, but in how you treated others, no matter who they were. Sophie, the newest addition to the team, didn't know Jack's quiet legacy. She had just graduated from a prestigious hospitality school and was thrilled to land a job at such a well-known establishment. She had studied the protocols, the etiquette, the expectations, and was eager to impress. But as she moved through the evening, something about the man in the corner table irritated her. His simple attire didn't match the glamour she was accustomed to seeing at the Grand Oak. She had worked hard to gain the respect of the other staff and customers, and here was a man, so out of place in her eyes, taking up valuable table space. It was as if he was defying the polished world she had worked so hard to be a part of. With a deep sigh, Sophie walked toward Jack's table. Her gaze was sharp, her smile stiff, but her tone was condescending. "Excuse me, sir," she began, "I couldn't help but notice you've been sitting here for quite some time, and we have reservations for more distinguished guests. Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable at the bar?" Jack didn't flinch. His eyes met hers with quiet intensity, the kind that spoke of years spent navigating the fast-moving world of business and cinema. "I'm fine here," he replied simply, taking another sip of his whiskey. Sophie, feeling the need to assert herself, continued, "I understand, but our clientele prefers to experience the full ambience of the restaurant. You might want to consider a more suitable location, for your own comfort." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, but Jack remained unshaken, his steady gaze never wavering. Sophie's frustration grew. She had worked hard to earn her place here, to prove her worth, and this man, dressed like a casual diner, was ruining the environment she had worked so hard to curate. Across the room, Thomas, the seasoned manager, watched the scene unfold. His face tightened in concern. He could see the tension building in Sophie's posture, the way her words became more pointed, more harsh. He had witnessed this before, a young staff member who overestimated their importance and underestimated the subtle power of quiet strength. Miguel, the young busboy, had been observing the exchange from the periphery. His hands, once steady, began to tremble as he watched the scene unfold. He recognized the man at the table. He had seen Jack before, many times, actually. Miguel, who had grown up watching classic films with his father, knew exactly who this man was. But he also knew how this situation could escalate, and it terrified him. "Miss Sophie," Miguel said, stepping toward her cautiously. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "I think you should check with Thomas before continuing." Sophie's eyes flashed with irritation. "Miguel, stay out of this. This is my table, and I know what I'm doing." Her words were sharp, almost dismissive. But the tension in the room was palpable now. Thomas had noticed the growing unease in the air, and he started moving toward them, his face drawn in concern. The other staff, many of whom had worked at the Grand Oak for years, exchanged worried looks. They knew something was wrong. They could feel it in the air. Sophie was too caught up in the pressure to be perfect, to prove herself. Her words became even sharper, her patience thinning. "I'm sorry, sir, but this isn't a casual bar. This is the Grand Oak, and our patrons expect a level of sophistication and elegance. Maybe you should leave this table for someone who understands that." Jack placed his glass down slowly, his movements deliberate, measured, and precise. He looked Sophie in the eye with a quiet calm that seemed to cut through the noise of the room. "You seem to have a misunderstanding of what this place represents," he said, his voice low but carrying an undeniable weight. For a brief moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Sophie stood frozen, the realization of her words settling in, but it was too late. She had crossed a line. The room grew silent as Thomas finally reached their table, his face pale. He knew that this was no ordinary guest. With a small, knowing smile, Jack leaned forward and spoke, his voice carrying through the now silent dining room. "I've been coming here for months, Sophie. I sit at this table because it reminds me of what this restaurant used to be, real, humble, and about treating people with dignity. What you don't know, is that I own this place." The shock was immediate. Sophie's face drained of color as the weight of her mistake hit her. She had judged a man who wasn't just a customer, he was the very person who had made the Grand Oak what it was. Miguel stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. This was more than just a lesson for Sophie. It was a lesson for everyone. True elegance, true class, wasn't in what you wore or how much money you had, it was in how you treated people, all people, no matter where they came from. As the tension slowly ebbed away, Jack stood, his calm presence commanding the room once more. "I've always believed that true respect is earned by how you treat others," he said, his voice steady and firm. "And I hope you all understand that this place, this restaurant, will always be about that." The silence in the room deepened, and for the first time that evening, the staff seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. They had witnessed a moment of reckoning, a lesson about respect, dignity, and what it truly meant to belong. James reveals his ownership, a lesson in respect and dignity. The Grand Oak had always been more than just a high-end restaurant. It was a place that had built its reputation not only on its exquisite dishes and luxurious ambience but also on the underlying values of respect and hospitality. Guests who visited this upscale eatery were often treated as royalty, but there was one thing they rarely understood about the place: its owner, James Matthews, never wanted to be treated as a celebrity. James had been coming to the Grand Oak for years, enjoying the simplicity of sitting in the corner booth with a glass of bourbon, watching the elegant world around him. Despite his status in Hollywood, he preferred to keep a low profile, never seeking attention or admiration. He had always felt that true luxury was about people's hearts, not their clothes or their social media following. 6 months ago, when the opportunity arose, James decided to purchase the Grand Oak. It wasn't about fame or fortune for him, it was about preserving the true essence of hospitality, treating every guest with kindness and respect, regardless of their status or appearance. He made it clear to the staff that he didn't want to be treated any differently than the other customers, and they were to show him no special treatment. But tonight, as the evening unfolded, the tension between James and the new waitress, Olivia, was becoming harder to ignore. Olivia was young, just starting her career in the hospitality industry. Full of ambition and eager to climb the social ladder, she quickly found herself at the Grand Oak, a prestigious spot known for its exclusive clientele. She had learned the ins and outs of fine dining, but what she hadn't anticipated was the subtle power dynamic at play in a place like this. She saw the wealthy patrons in their sleek suits and shiny shoes, with every detail of their appearance and behavior fitting perfectly into her image of success. But there was one man, sitting at his usual corner table, whose appearance didn't fit the picture. James, dressed casually in a navy blue shirt and well-worn jeans, looked like a regular diner to Olivia. He didn't have the tailored suit or the flashy accessories that most of the restaurant's guests sported, and he didn't seem to be paying attention to the world around him. The more Olivia observed, the more frustrated she became. Why was he sitting at a table that could be reserved for someone more fitting of the restaurant's reputation? She approached him with a sense of superiority in her voice, masking her irritation. "Sir, I noticed you've been sitting here for quite some time," she began. "We have some important reservations, and I think you would be more comfortable at the bar. This table is really better suited for someone, well, more fitting of the atmosphere we have here." James looked up slowly, his calm expression never changing. He didn't respond right away, taking a quiet sip from his drink. Olivia stood there, her words hanging in the air, not fully realizing the mistake she was making. He looked at her with a slight tilt of his head, as if considering his next words carefully. "I'm comfortable here," James said simply, his voice steady and measured. He didn't raise his tone or react with anger. He just spoke the truth. Olivia's frustration only deepened. She couldn't believe he wasn't understanding the gravity of her suggestion. "You see, sir," she continued, "our guests expect a certain ambience, and it's important that we maintain the standard of luxury here. You might not understand, but, well, we've got high-profile clients to consider." James remained unmoved. He set his glass down with deliberate care, then spoke again, his words now carrying more weight. "What you don't understand," he said quietly, "is that I own this restaurant." There was a long pause. Olivia's breath caught in her throat, and the room seemed to fall silent, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The words were simple, but the shock was immense. She had just insulted the owner of the Grand Oak. Her face turned pale, and the realization of her error hit her like a ton of bricks. James leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving hers. "I didn't buy this place for the prestige or the glamour. I bought it because this restaurant, for me, represents something far more important, a place where everyone, no matter their background, no matter how they're dressed, should be treated with the same respect and kindness. It's about treating people as people, not based on what they wear or how many followers they have on social media." Olivia stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, but no words came out. James continued, his voice still calm but carrying a depth that made every word seem heavier. "I've been coming here for years. I've sat at this table many times, enjoying the same simple meal and drink. And the one thing that has always stood out to me is how people are treated. If you can't treat someone with dignity, regardless of how they look, then you're missing the whole point of what this place is about." A few of the veteran staff members who had overheard the exchange exchanged knowing glances. They had seen this moment before, a new employee, caught up in their own ambition and judgment, failing to understand the deeper values that made the Grand Oak what it was. But now, they were witnessing something more powerful, a lesson that would resonate far beyond the walls of the restaurant. Olivia's heart raced. She wanted to apologize, to say something to make it right, but the words felt inadequate. She had not only insulted a customer, but she had insulted the very man who had made this place what it was. She felt embarrassed, ashamed of her narrow view of success and status. James gave her a moment to process, then continued. "This place is about more than just luxury. It's about the values we uphold: respect, dignity, kindness. If you can learn to treat everyone with that same level of care, then you'll understand what this place really stands for. And if you can't, then maybe this isn't the right place for you." The room seemed to exhale collectively as the tension dissipated, and for the first time that evening, Olivia began to understand. The true luxury of the Grand Oak wasn't in its gold leaf desserts or its celebrity clientele, it was in the heart of its values, the respect it gave to every person who walked through its doors. James stood up from his table, nodding politely at Olivia before turning to leave, leaving behind not just a lesson, but a legacy of humility and dignity that would echo throughout the Grand Oak for years to come. The unexpected lesson in respect, a turning point at the Grand Oak. The evening at the Grand Oak had been running smoothly, as it usually did. The elegant chandeliers overhead shimmered with soft light, and the hum of high-end conversations filled the air. The restaurant's elite clientele, artists, moguls, and tech entrepreneurs, sat at their tables, savoring the fine food and the exclusivity of their surroundings. It was the kind of place where status was earned with each step through the door, and where respect was often given in accordance with that status. But at one table, in the corner of the room, the story was unfolding differently. A man dressed simply in a white button-down shirt and dark jeans sat quietly, nursing a drink. His name was Alex Carter. What most of the guests didn't know was that Alex wasn't just another patron. He was the owner of the Grand Oak. He had purchased it 6 months ago, not because of the prestige or the luxury it offered, but because he believed in something deeper: respect for all people, no matter their background or appearance. He was a man who had built his career by standing against the tide of elitism, and he had brought those same values to his restaurant. Alex had been coming to the Grand Oak regularly, slipping in unnoticed, just as he liked it. But tonight, he wasn't going to let things slide as they usually did. The moment had come for him to address the behavior of one of the new staff members, Sarah. Sarah, like so many young people, was eager to prove herself. She had just graduated from a prestigious culinary school, and working at the Grand Oak was her big break. She had spent her entire career focused on presenting the right image: impeccable dress, flawless manners, and a well-curated list of Instagram followers. But her idea of success didn't always align with the core values of the Grand Oak. As she moved through the restaurant, her gaze caught a man in a casual shirt and jeans. To Sarah, Alex didn't seem to belong. She watched him for a moment, judging the way he didn't match the other guests, his outfit too simple, his demeanor too relaxed. It wasn't long before her judgment began to show in her actions. She was quick to dismiss him, assuming he was just another regular diner who didn't quite fit the atmosphere of the Grand Oak. With a forced smile, Sarah walked toward his table, ready to make a suggestion. "Sir, I noticed you've been sitting here for quite some time. I think we're expecting more exclusive guests shortly. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the bar, where it's less crowded," she said, her tone dripping with a false politeness. Alex didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, calm, almost as though he had been expecting this moment all along. "I'm comfortable here, thank you," he replied simply, his voice carrying a quiet strength. Sarah, undeterred, continued with her suggestion. "Our guests typically expect a certain ambience here, sir. I'm not sure you're aware, but this table is usually reserved for people who, well, understand the standard we uphold." Her words hung in the air, her arrogance more evident now than before. Alex, however, didn't show any sign of anger. Instead, he sat back in his chair, taking a slow sip of his drink. "It seems you don't understand what this place is about," he said, his voice calm yet filled with purpose. Sarah's face flushed, but she stood her ground. "I'm sorry if I'm being blunt, but we have to maintain a certain image here at the Grand Oak. It's about luxury, sophistication, and—" Alex interrupted her, his tone still composed but firm. "I understand exactly what you're saying, Sarah. And I can see where you're coming from. But what you're missing is what this place really represents. Luxury and status aren't about what you wear or who you know. They're about how you treat people. How you treat everyone. The person sitting next to you might be a CEO, or they might be someone just visiting for the first time. But they deserve the same respect." Sarah was speechless. The weight of his words sank in slowly, her arrogance suddenly feeling small and misplaced. The room had fallen quiet, and other staff members, who had been watching from the periphery, stood still, waiting to see what would happen next. Alex's eyes never left hers, as if he was silently giving her the space to come to terms with what she had done. "You have a choice, Sarah," he said after a pause. "You can leave, go find another job at a place that values appearance over respect. Or you can stay, and I'll personally make sure you learn what true hospitality is. From the ground up. You'll learn from the staff here, people who understand that respect is what truly makes a place like this great." Sarah's chest tightened, a wave of realization crashing over her. She had been caught in a mindset that valued outward appearance above everything else. In that moment, she understood that she had been part of a system that favored superficial standards over the real meaning of connection and respect. And she was ashamed. Just as Alex had finished speaking, Miguel, a young busboy who had been working at the Grand Oak for a few years, stepped forward. He had overheard the exchange and had been silently observing the scene unfold. His eyes met Alex's, and in that moment, Alex gave a subtle nod, signaling to Miguel that it was time. "Miguel," Alex called. "Would you like to train as a waiter? I think it's time you took on more responsibility here. You understand what this place is all about, and we could use more people like you on the team." Miguel, who had always respected the way Alex treated everyone with dignity, stood tall. He nodded, his face beaming with pride and humility. "Yes, sir. I would be honored." Sarah watched as Miguel was promoted on the spot, feeling a pang of regret. It was a turning point for her. She had witnessed firsthand what respect looked like in action, and she realized she could learn a great deal from those who truly understood the heart of hospitality. With a deep breath, Sarah made her choice. "I'd like to stay and learn, sir," she said quietly, looking at Alex. Her voice was filled with sincerity, and for the first time that evening, she felt the weight of humility on her shoulders. Alex smiled, a small nod of approval. "Good choice," he said. "We'll start with the basics tomorrow." The tension in the room began to dissipate, and the staff seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The older patrons at nearby tables smiled, nodding their approval. It was a rare sight, a lesson in real hospitality unfolding before their eyes. And so, that evening at the Grand Oak became more than just another night of luxury. It became a night when a young waitress learned that true respect comes not from appearances or status, but from how we treat one another, how we value each person, regardless of their place in society. Alex left the restaurant that night with a quiet satisfaction. He had made his point, not through anger or confrontation, but with a simple, profound lesson that would resonate with everyone who had witnessed it. The Grand Oak, once again, had become a place where true luxury was defined by respect, kindness, and dignity, values that would live on long after the night had ended. The aftermath and final lesson, a night of humility at the Grand Oak. The evening at the Grand Oak had reached its peak of tension. The clinking of glasses and the soft hum of conversation now seemed distant, as if the entire room had paused to take in the lesson unfolding before them. Everyone in the restaurant, the staff and patrons alike, had witnessed a moment that would forever change the dynamic of the Grand Oak. It wasn't just the hum of luxury or the whisper of exclusivity that made the restaurant stand out, it was a moment of true humility and respect. Amelia, the young waitress who had been caught in a moment of arrogance, stood before Alex Carter, the owner of the Grand Oak. She had been harsh, judgmental, and dismissive toward the man in the simple shirt and jeans who she had assumed didn't belong. But now, after hearing his words and realizing the depth of her mistake, she found herself at a crossroads. Alex had given her a choice, to walk away or to stay and learn what true hospitality meant. She had thought long and hard about it. She had come to the Grand Oak with a mindset shaped by the world's standards of success, wealth, appearance, status. But tonight, she was confronted with the humbling truth that respect, dignity, and kindness were the real markers of true luxury. With a deep breath, Amelia made her decision. She would stay. She would learn. It wasn't about the flashy clothes, the high-profile guests, or the Instagram-worthy moments. It was about treating every person with the same respect and care, regardless of their background or appearance. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Carter," Amelia said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I will learn. I will do better." Alex smiled, nodding in approval. "Good choice, Amelia. Welcome to the team." The atmosphere in the room shifted, and those who had been silently observing the scene exchanged glances. The veteran staff members, who had seen countless trends come and go, were the first to break the silence. They knew that Alex's lesson wasn't just for Amelia, it was for everyone who worked here. The young staff had learned the hard way that real class and respect were not about who you knew, what you wore, or what you posted on social media. It was about how you treated people. All people. A soft round of applause began from the back of the room, spreading through the restaurant like a ripple in water. The guests, who had witnessed the quiet exchange, couldn't help but nod in approval. Even the most seasoned patrons of the Grand Oak knew that this moment was something more profound than just another fine dining experience. It was a reminder of something many had forgotten: true luxury wasn't in the things we had, it was in how we treated one another. Amelia stood there, humbled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The lesson she had just learned wasn't one that could be found in a textbook or taught by textbooks of high society. It was one of genuine kindness, a lesson that Alex Carter had imparted through nothing more than a few words, a calm demeanor, and a quiet act of leadership. As the applause died down, Alex addressed the room once more. "This restaurant, the Grand Oak, stands for something more than just fine dining. It stands for the belief that every person, regardless of their wealth, their status, or how they look, deserves to be treated with the same respect. Tonight, we've seen what happens when we remember that. And we've seen the power of humility. Let's carry that with us every day. The room remained silent for a moment, everyone reflecting on the weight of his words. In that silence, the true lesson of the night began to settle in. The Grand Oak was not just a place of luxury, it was a sanctuary for those who believed in treating others with kindness, regardless of the external markers of success. Amelia, now part of that vision, looked around at her colleagues, at the veteran staff members who had always known what respect meant. She had learned something invaluable tonight. She had learned that true greatness wasn't about looking the part, it was about living it. As she left her shift that night, she promised herself that she would carry this lesson with her. No matter where life took her, she would always remember the power of respect, humility, and dignity. And as for the Grand Oak, it would continue to thrive, not because of its gold leaf desserts or its celebrity patrons, but because of the real values that lay at its heart. So, what do you think? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to learn the true meaning of respect? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the importance of kindness and humility. Thanks for watching.